I think, going back to my concerns about small and mid-sized business, you look at the Russell 2000, and those are actually relatively large businesses compared to the average small and mid-sized business. I think the Russell 2000, just looking at it's up 1.5% year to date, right? So you haven't had this appreciation really there. And again, and I think this is where you're right. And I look at it from, financial policy, monetary policy. It's really hard to do anything to help the lower, income people that don't really drive the higher income people even more money, right? If you do things that make the stock market go high, you do really well in that respect. The other thing I've noticed of late, disruption. So that's interesting to me. So disruptive stocks, and I'll look at an ARKK, for lack of a better index, for what's going. That's performed really well of late. So you're starting to see some enthusiasm, and that's a little bit of new wealth creation. I think there's been some new wealth creation in cryptocurrencies. But again, even there, I talk to people and they're all excited about, stablecoins will let everyone, join this financial revolution. And well, if your starting point is no money in the bank, how are you going to, it doesn't matter whether stablecoins are easier to access or not. And, they're going to create wealth across, India. And people don't even have cell phones and something like it. So I had not heard of the I-shaped economy. It's intriguing because, you do see this wealth effect. I'll go back to the crypto community. I think they did a phenomenal job lobbying this administration, getting very involved. Because as a community, they all have one thing in mind, which is to get crypto higher. Whether they want Bitcoin or altcoins, doesn't really matter. They've been pushing it. So even there, you kind of see this within crypto, you have kind of that little I. I think we looked at, I can't remember. It's not Julian coefficient, but it's a measure kind of corruptness and wealth distribution. And crypto was right up there with North Korea. That all the wealth is relatively concentrated in a few hands. But I've looked at this in the past, and again, we go back to my point where the GFC, they tried to help small business. The reality is it's hard to do things on scale that don't just help those companies that can achieve scale. And I think that's happening within this. You saw some of the attempts to maybe get broadband more. It just doesn't work very well. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not into a basic economy or something like that, but or basic income. But the problem does seem to be expanding.
Well, and it's you could listen to us rail about it and say, well, look, I'm doing fine, so what do I need to really take it into account? And you have to know, though, that is my opinion. You don't have to share it, Peter, but you would probably know better than I, given your firm's advisors. That's playing a major part in the populist's voting decisions. I mean, in many ways, it's a big reason why Trump is president now. Is he rode that populist wave of people saying, "Hey, we're feeling increasingly left behind."
Yeah, and there was a lot that he's trying to address, and you're seeing this in other countries as well. I do think that there is something to be said for kind of national production for national security, and that shouldn't just be within the U.S. I think every country almost has to have their baseline production of the things that they need, and that could create some jobs. I do think we might need to do some sort of subsidies, some way to kind of jumpstart that. Again, that investment the Department of Defense made in MP was maybe a good, interesting step. There's talk that Japan's going to contribute $550 billion that we can do to help those things. So I do think we're right to want some sort of economy that we can build out from. I would say it scared me, and I did not call the bottom by any means, but I was very nervous at the stock market before they started cracking, got a lot of people in. And one thing I told the people, and I still stand by this, is when you were looking at what was going on in the economy, you can't just look at your portfolio as your stock portfolio. You almost have to look at it as your life portfolio. And to me, some of the things that were potentially going on with the way Trump was pushing on tariffs, that's going to affect your house. But it's also going to affect your child's job. Can your child or your brother or sister have jobs? Will your job exist? And so I think it was right to be a little bit conservative in markets at that time. I mean, you get back to comfortable. I missed the bottom, but I haven't been bearish in a while as he kind of pivoted away from tariffs. But all those things, right? It's getting harder to figure out how society is going to, move up. And I think that was always the great thing about the U.S., say, versus the U.K. that we kicked out, is there was a relatively easy way to, get up in life in the U.S. And that seems to be getting harder and harder.
Okay, so I promise we're going to get to your more market outlook, and folks will narrow the beam to the rest of this year soon. But while we're on this kind of wider or longer arc, you mentioned earlier one that the jobs market might not be quite quite as robust as generally thought right now. And I'm right there with you on that. And maybe we can talk about that in a little bit. But you specifically zeroed in on the unemployment rate for new college grads, which is spiking. I mean, I've seen the chart. It actually is getting into nervous territory here. And you made a point, which I think I want to make sure isn't lost on folks, which is, it may not just be a normal business cycle where companies are saying, hey, we're just not hiring that much at this point in the business cycle. They're saying, hey, we're investing to remove these jobs. And these jobs might not come back, right? There's sort of, AI is definitely going to contribute some wonderful things to the economy, and we have to invest in it. It's one of those national production for national security? Yeah. We I think very understandably have said, look, the AI race is kind of an all or none, right? Whoever wins that race is going to be the future superpower. And we want to retain our superpower status, so we sure as hell better win that race, right? We're very clearly, making that commitment, and all sorts of investments are getting announced left and right for this. And I do think that will actually create, for some period of time, next 5 years, 10 years, whatever, a lot of kind of trade type jobs, which I think is a good thing. And I think our trades are they're under resourced right now, and we got a bunch of vacant jobs. And honestly, there's a lot of folks who went to college and got degrees that probably aren't proving very useful for them. Like to have part of our younger cohort go into the trades and help us build the infrastructure of tomorrow to win as a nation, I think is great. But once that wave of build out is over, AI will have had plenty of time to kind of have chipped away at a lot of the job stack elsewhere in society during that time. And I do wonder, where does this all end, Peter? I mean, do we end up with a kind of a chronic under/unemployment crisis in this country?
For now, I think I'll take the more optimistic side that, we had the Industrial Revolution, just changes the type of jobs. The internet seemed to create more jobs. Though again, I think it's, you run the risk that you wind up, the people who can do the jobs that are left post AI are going to have to be super smart, super flexible, or really interesting, or maybe more sales oriented. There's going to be things that AI is not good at, including things like, plumbing. But there are going to be things that maybe
until the robots come along. But yes.
Yes, right. The robots, electricity, I don't even include in that. I do think we're seeing some innovation. So I think we're going to see real energy demand in this country. And I think when we say the word energy, people my age, we've all been conditioned to think about oil. Oil kind of and energy are one and the same. I think we have to think about electricity. Actually, the electricity production is what's going to be important. And I think that's kind of, we're seeing that. We're also already seeing a lot of innovation around the cooling of these things, because there is a heavy demand on water. So they're coming up with alternate cooling systems, ways to do it. So there's going to be innovation, there's going to be invention, there's going to be opportunities. But yeah, I am a little bit worried about how people kind of take that first step into the career if those are the jobs that people are most comfortable with. Like, no one's allowing the CEO level decisions to be made by AI right now. Everyone's like, whoa, yeah, we might get some input, but we're doing it ourselves. But go back to that pitch book, right? Okay, well, maybe we'll let the AI do a few pitch books, and we can review it and have fewer people. And then in theory, will slowly work its way up. I think it's, I certainly try and figure out how within my job, I'll be able to kind of try and stay one step ahead of AI or adapt to it. And then if you want to go back to the jobs data, I'd love to give you one thing that I feels a bit wonky. So at the risk of being wonky, I think it's important.
Wonk away.
So they have this, what's called the birth-death model. That's a huge contributor this year. It contributed in 2 months, 600,000 jobs out of a total of 300,000. And what it does is it takes EIN, so employment identification number applications. And so it's trying to figure out how many new businesses were started versus, businesses that folded away. And I think they attribute too many jobs to that, because historically, if someone was applied for an EIN, they were someone maybe creating a bakery. So they were going to have 2 or 3 employees. So there's some number of jobs. And what I think has gone on in the gig economy is as people start seeing their own economic conditions worse, or they're getting a little bit nervous about their hours, they actually set up to become an Uber driver or something along those lines. And there's all sorts of websites that help you set up an EIN, because then it makes it easier to track as your small business. You can run some expenses through it, et cetera. So I think the EIN application rise was a bad thing. It was a sign to me that people were uncomfortable with their jobs, so they're starting to get set up for the gig economy.
Right.
And the one thing that I feel really backs that up is law school applications have spiked higher. And I view law school applications spiking higher as, again, well, I'm not getting a job, so I might as well do something. Law school seems like a good place to hide out for 3 years.